True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. We do everything we can to ensure that everything we broadcast is fair and factual, but the opinions expressed and statements made by our guests are theirs and theirs alone. These opinions and statements do not reflect the views or opinions of our presenters, Due North PR, or the podcast itself. You're listening to True North, a regular roundup of business and community news and developments in Northland. Hello and welcome to True North. Thank you for taking the time to listen. It's Wednesday, the 23rd of July. I'm Peter Heath. On the show ahead,
with significant private investment, I think encouraged by certainty and confidence in some centrally funded infrastructure, we believe we can get to 60 billion. And to give you some context, that's just 1.1% growth rate per annum on top of what we're already achieving to get there. So I think it's ambitious, but it's achievable.
I speak with Julian Smith, Group Secretary of the Northland Corporate Group, about a report it is launching in Wellington today. It maintains that Northland has the potential to contribute much more significantly to economic growth in New Zealand generally and to Auckland in particular. It says Northland could conceivably boost its forecast GDP for 2050 by 50%, or an additional $20 billion, to a whopping $60 billion. But only if potential investors here are given the certainty and confidence they need in core infrastructure to unleash $38 billion in latent capital investments. First, though, a look at what's happening in business and community news across our region. A quick update on where we're at with local water done well and the status we reported in episode 7 on June the 24th. If you recall, having decided that they were each going to follow a different path towards the water services delivery plans they need to submit to the Department of Internal Affairs by September the 3rd, our 3 district councils agreed nevertheless to create a cross-council working group, the Northland Water Services Working Group, to, quotes, work through what collaboration across councils could look like, close quotes. Well, now this working group has decided that it is possible, after all, for all 3 councils to work together, more or less, and with some notable carve-outs, to provide the water infrastructure we all need. It met 4 times over 6 weeks and, long story short, has recommended that the 3 councils establish a combined, council-controlled water services organisation by the 1st of July 2027 for the delivery of drinking and wastewater services, with responsibility for stormwater to remain with each individual council. Whangarei District Council meets tomorrow, the 24th of July, to consider the working group's recommendations. Far North and Kaipara will follow with their decisions shortly thereafter. And finally, Business Desk reports that KiwiRail has delivered to ministers a detailed business case for the proposed Marsden Point rail spur. The document will allow the government to make a decision on whether it will fund detailed design work on the project. If so, this is expected to take about a year. This means that construction of the Marsden Point rail link could start from late 2026 or early 2027. KiwiRail has acquired around 97% of the land it needs for the rail spur for $30.1 million, with a further $2.5 million committed. The money comes from a $40 million government investment. KiwiRail has been working on the 19-kilometre rail spur since at least 2021. An indicative business case from 2022 put the estimated cost at around $1 billion. In 2023, KiwiRail got approval to proceed with high-level design work, including value engineering, to reduce the cost of the project. Now, the Northland Corporate Group, a consortium of the region's largest businesses, has today unveiled a piece of work that outlines the potential contribution that a fully enabled Northland could make for the New Zealand economy in general and Auckland's economy in particular. The report, developed for the Northland Corporate Group by the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research, also outlines the targeted investment, sector development and improved infrastructure needed to drive the economic transformation in Northland that would enable that enhanced contribution. This is the second such report commissioned by the Northland Corporate Group. The first looked at the economic benefits of four-laning State Highway 1 between Warkworth and Whangarei and helped inform the decision-making around that project. With me today to tell us more about the second report, called Northland Delivers, is Northland Corporate Group Secretary Julian Smith. Hi, Julian.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for joining us today. Much appreciated. Let's kick off with the findings of this report. In a nutshell, what does it tell us? What additional economic contribution could Northland be making to both Auckland and New Zealand Inc. if it was able to do so?
Sure. Well, what it tells us is the current performance of Northland economically and where the opportunities for growth lie. So, in essence, currently Northland delivers $11.2 billion in GDP to the national economy per annum. And to give you some context, that's up from $2 billion in around 2000. And usefully, Northland has been keeping pace with sort of national growth trends. So we're about 2.7% of the country's GDP. However, what it did also tell us is that our GDP per capita is about 30% lower than the rest of the country. And so if that was equalised today, if our GDP per capita for folks in the north was the same as the rest of the country, our contribution would be $16 billion. So in terms of what does the potential look like? Well, we asked NZIER to model that for us and to look out to 2050, a 25-year horizon. And they advise us, and we agree with them, that Northland could be a $60 billion economy by 2050.
60 billion.
60
billion.
So based on our current run rate, looking at the longitudinal data, we will probably achieve somewhere in the low 40 billions by 2050 if all things remain the same. But with significant private investment, I think encouraged by certainty and confidence and some centrally funded infrastructure, we believe we can get to 60 billion. And to give you some context, that's just 1.1% growth rate per annum on top of what we're already achieving to get there. So I think it's ambitious, but it's achievable.
Look, if realising Northland's full economic potential is about better enabling the region, and you talked about central funding for core infrastructure, what does that enablement look like? And in particular, what does it look like beyond infrastructural investment from central government? What else needs to happen, and who needs to make it happen?
Yeah, good question. I think we've got quite a bit of data on this from that first NZIER report we did on the expressway and what the economic benefits of that could be. And we actually surveyed about 800 businesses in Northland, so that's about 11% of our business population, to ask them that specific information. And we learned a number of things. Possibly the most surprising thing we learned was how much latent capital is sitting in Northland waiting to be invested if the conditions are right for investment. So there's about businesses in the north alone are telling us that they are sitting on about $38 billion worth of access to capital that they're prepared to invest if they have more confidence and certainty in running a business in the north. And I think those are the key phrases to remember. It's confidence and certainty. So one of the key findings from NZIER in this particular new report is that Northland is immediately proximate to Auckland, should really be benefiting from the Auckland economy and engine of the New Zealand economy, the way the Waikato is. We have lots of beautiful natural resources and sort of great capability in the north. So what is it that's stopping us from getting there? And the report strongly identifies this connection of connectivity between the two regions. You know, geographically, it's currently quite difficult for businesses to really get their freight and produce into Auckland. But also this fact that investors, particularly business investors, require certainty and confidence in order to make large-scale investment. So that's really one of the kind of key criteria. We're already seeing quite a bit of private investment coming up into the north. So you might have seen that Channel Infrastructure have announced with their Marsden Energy Precinct. I think it's a $3.3 billion investment there. That will lead to, I think, about a $260 billion increase in GDP once it's constructed, over 1,000 jobs and so forth. And there's planned infrastructure upgrades for Northport and so on. But key to all of this is all of those businesses having confidence and certainty that the connectivity between this region and where they sell their products or services exists and is resilient.
So it is really all about connectivity. Is that necessarily roads, rails, and transport infrastructure, or is that are there different elements of connectivity that we need to be looking at?
Yes. Well, I think of three elements of connectivity. So there's sort of transport connectivity, and you'll hear this term if you're a transport guru, multimodal transport. So coastal shipping or rail or road. And also in the case, I think of Northland's tourism industry, air. There's energy connectivity. So how do we kind of get renewable energy or clean energy from the north into Auckland where it's needed, where there's a really big market and opportunity. And that's really transmission and distribution infrastructure. And we're sitting on some quite significant assets in terms of our Marsden Point region in New Zealand that we should talk about. And then there's connectivity around telecommunications and capability. We're doing quite well. There's been a really significant, I think, increase in telecommunications capability in the north, and some good lessons learned after Cyclone Gabriel.
NZIER report talks about the need to grow per capita contribution to GDP. In Northland, how do we do that? What's missing? What needs to happen?
Well, if you chat to an economist, the shortest answer to that question is we need more of our Northland population in the workforce. So as a region, we have quite a significant portion of our population who that's quite young, so not at workforce age, or is not currently in the workforce. And another kind of key driver of that, I think, if you chat to any business owner in the north, is the need for increased tertiary education and capability build. So those are the two kind of key attributes that we need to focus on, and really the 25-year roadmap to 2050, in order to achieve that 60 billion, will absolutely require us to see some structural shifts in the population in the north, and having a greater proportion of people who live in the north being active in the workforce. I think the other kind of key component is making sure that we can attract the talent that we need to really help grow the region. And that's making sure that we can create attractive job opportunities for the best and brightest in the country to come live and work and play here.
There was an interesting model adopted by the people who developed the NAFA Innovation Enterprise Park. Hasn't quite come to pass, but the concept was interesting, where the idea was to train people for jobs that were specific to that particular location. Is there some need, do you think, to be looking at equipping Northlanders with the skills that are needed specifically for the key areas of endeavour which have been identified as strategic for the region?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a strong argument for that. So if we think about where has Northland got real strength and where should we be really enhancing our economic development, what are the key sectors? So we have huge capability in construction and kind of contracting capability. So we have really large firms already in the region in terms of structural steel fabrication, electric technology, components, and so forth. And they provide a whole variety of services, usually out of region, and really rely on a very highly skilled workforce. And so I think if you chat with businesses in that specific area, they're looking specifically how can they get more highly skilled people to be working here. Many of those folks, of course, delivering services out of region. So if we're thinking about people that live in the region, the energy sector is going to be a really big driver of the Northland economy moving forward. So we have the potential to deliver pretty much all of Auckland's increased electricity demands over the next 25 years. So that's specifically building skills and capability for people to support and serve transmission and distribution lines, solar, geothermal, and wind-based generation. Really other big opportunity with the recent unlocking of another 3,000 hectares of land from the Te Tai Tokiro Water Trust. So how can we really get more specialist high-value primary production and food? And that's more likely to be in areas I understand as avocados or high-value fruit and produce. And how do we those activities. Um, and I think if there's plenty of smarter people than me that are kind of looking at the issue of tertiary education. I think one of the big barriers that I'm hearing from folks who are experts in that area is how can we actually create those tertiary campuses in the north that really encourage our young people to stay in region.
Yeah, it'll require an element of joined up thinking, won't it, between the tertiary education providers, the employers, and the economic development folk.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So you referenced there what Northland could provide to Auckland in terms of energy. The report is called Northland Delivers, and in my intro, I said that the report outlined the potential contribution that a fully enabled Northland could make to the New Zealand economy in general and Auckland's economy in particular. Now, what is it, apart from the energy that you've already spoken about, the energy aspects that you've already spoken about, that you feel that Northland or the NZII feels that Northland can contribute to Auckland's economy?
Well, there's actually a lot that we already contribute to Auckland's economy today, and I think it was one of the reasons why we felt it was important to commission this report. Was the fact that many of the things that Northland does are not well known or are not considered on a day-to-day basis because we do it well. For example, Northland is essential for the country, in particular for Auckland around fuel security, whether that's petrol or diesel, in particular important for jet fuel. All of Auckland's jet fuel, for example, comes through the pipeline that comes from Marsden Point, which underpins pretty much the entire tourism industry in New Zealand when you think about it, because I think more than 70% of all of New Zealand's international tourists come in via Auckland. So huge fuel security. Most of Auckland's construction sector relies heavily on contracting capability, but materials from Northland. So all of New Zealand's domestically produced cement comes from Northland. Most of the specialist steel fabrication for high-rise construction buildings like Commercial Bay in Auckland or Bowen House in Wellington or the new International Convention Centre in Auckland are all coming from Whangarei. So, and if you think about electrical maintenance and servicing, North Power provide a whole variety of contracting services right across the North Island. I think the majority of lines companies across the North Island actually use North Power to help them maintain and manage those services. And last but not least, if you're a fan of the kumara, 96% apparently of that comes from the Kaipara region, which is where I call home, but also nearly half of all avocados. I think more than 70,000 tonnes of beef come from Northland, a significant amount of milk solids as well, although I think most of that's exported. So a lot really in terms of food security, fuel security, contracting capability.
And these could all, I mean, these quantities and these amounts could all be boosted through this greater connectivity that this report is talking about. Is that the essence of what we're saying here?
Well, certainly, I think if you think just about Northland as a subtropical climate, and I understand that we can generally produce food and produce in the north at times of the year when the rest of the country can't. But when you chat with food producers and manufacturers, particularly in the horticultural sector who are in the far north, one of the single biggest barriers to running a viable operation is just connectivity and how difficult it is to get that produce from the far north down into Auckland.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I was sitting here from an Auckland perspective, why is Northland important to me if I'm living in Auckland? Apart from all of the things we've just described, one of the single biggest issues that Auckland has to navigate over the next 25 years is its energy or electricity demand is expected to double where it is now. And the challenge is, where is that electricity going to come from, particularly considering the transmission infrastructure from south of Auckland is at pretty much full capacity. So it means we need some more infrastructure to support Auckland. Helpfully, some very sensible people built a transmission infrastructure from Marsden Point in the 70s to Auckland that's only 5% utilised. So there's a real opportunity for Northland to actually deliver clean renewable energy to Marsden Point and have it transmitted down to Auckland. And just looking at a recent Transpower report on that, there's something like 2.7 gigawatts of planned renewable generation in the north. And to give you an idea of the size of that, that's about two and a bit times the size of the Huntly Power Station. So an enormous amount of Auckland's future energy can come from the north. I would say at least half based on current estimates.
Okay, so that's outlined the general potential. So what's the purpose of this work other than saying, hey, this is what could be? Um, what what do you hope to come out of it? What recommendations does the report make, and where to from here?
Yeah, well, there's really three key objectives of this piece of work. One is to really remind the country, and in particular remind business leaders in Auckland and government and industry leaders in Wellington that Northland is incredibly strategically important to the country. We're quite a humble region. We kind of just get on and do things and we don't make much of a song and dance about it. And I guess we were reminded during that unfortunate pylon incident that actually nobody in Auckland realised that there was no jet fuel being pumped to Auckland Airport, or that it was going to stop running once the generators ran out of fuel. So this kind of concern that no one really appreciates how important Northland is, particularly to the Auckland economy. And so really our first and primary goal is just to remind everyone that actually Northland is strategically important and we're making an important contribution to the country. The second thing is that actually to remind everyone that our proximity to Auckland and also our proximity to export markets, we've got I think the only natural deep water port in the country, and it's also the closest port to all of our export markets. We've just got a lot of resources, untapped resources and capability that we think can be really harnessed to improve our prosperity in this region, but also the prosperity of the country. And third but not least, or last but not least, we really want to remind the business community in Auckland, but also in particular politicians in Wellington, that if we are really going to reach our potential, then we need sustained alignment around the kind of core infrastructure and capability builds for our region. So, for example, the Northland Expressway, which we're obviously really big advocates for, has the potential to help drive national GDP by over $1 billion. The challenge, however, with that project, which has been announced, is that there's not political alignment on that in a cross-party way, and that creates real uncertainty. So one of our key messages from this report is if you really want to enable regional growth in New Zealand, then there needs to be confidence and certainty around the core infrastructure capability required to deliver that. And political flip-flopping as to whether something is a good idea or a bad idea really is a big distraction and a big challenge for us.
Absolutely. Hey, Julian, are you concerned that we're still having to make the case for investment in our region in order to stimulate economic development? Why is this message failing to land so consistently, do you think?
Good question. And I wonder if it's how we deliver the message. I think as someone who's lived, for example, in Wellington and worked in Wellington, there's a very specific way that that city works and runs if you particularly understand how kind of government works. And my observation is the furthest you are away from Wellington, the more difficult or misunderstood the relationship between your region is and Wellington. So if you chat with the folks in Southland, they will often suggest a similar rhetoric to the folks of Northland. And so I think our challenge, but also our opportunity, is to become more effective at actually really engaging with key decision makers in a way that works for them and works for us.
Yeah, hence, I guess the reason that you sort of like developed this report, which talks about the potential of Northland for the benefit of New Zealand Inc. and for, importantly, Auckland as well. Yeah.
Indeed, and I think the reality is, if you look across the spectrum of the country, almost every region is requiring more investment, more infrastructure, kind of more capability, more support. So we're competing with all of those other regions for attention, bandwidth, and investment. And so if we want to secure investment and alignment and kind of confidence in central infrastructure for our region, we have to really demonstrate that we're really easy to do business with, that there's lots of potential here, and we need to actually work with governments and business leaders in other areas in a way that's actually straightforward and easy for them to understand. My observation would be the way in which we typically work in the north doesn't really suit the way folks in Wellington like to work, and vice versa. So I think, considering how busy Wellington is in terms of its requirement to kind of serve the rest of the country, I think it's really up to us to make sure that we can make our case for investment in a way that's very clear and plain and simple for everyone to understand, but also back that up with data and back it up with alignment across our region. So making sure that the business community, the local government representatives, and iwi are all aligned and saying the same message to central government.
Absolutely. And it brings me on nicely to the next point I want to make, or the next question I want to ask. And at the risk of being accused of mischief making, which I'm really not, what drove the Northland Corporate Group to commission this report? I mean, surely this kind of work, telling the Northland story and advocating for our region on a national stage, is the job of our Regional Economic Development Agency and the Northland Chamber of Commerce. Why has the top or big end of town decided that it needs to take action on this?
Okay, well, good question. And I guess the simple answer to that question is we're working with Northland Inc. and North Chamber on this particular project. So it's a combined effort. What drove us was frustration, to be really blunt, but it was frustration that we were kind of the best kept secret in the country. So it was that realization during that Transpower incident where the pylon fell over that no one really understood the essential things that Northland does for the rest of the country. And it got us thinking to say, well, are we really telling our story and sharing our capability as well as we could? And I think, in our view, the honest answer to that was no, we're not. And so we immediately organised a workshop with Northland Inc. and North Chamber to really address that. And that was really the birth of the idea for this report came from that. So the design of the report, the scoping of it was actually really a partnership with Northland Inc. and North Chamber.
That's good to hear.
All of whom are supporting us with that. I will say that because we are a corporate group, it does also give us the opportunity to kind of go and commission and do very specific pieces of work and fund them directly, when that's not necessarily always that straightforward for an economic development agency in terms of how their resourcing and budgets operate.
Yeah, absolutely. So realizing Northland's potential is largely down to the region itself, isn't it? I mean, this is what this is about. This is about the region starting to say, "Hey, we need to do something about realizing that potential." We hear all the time from people like Shane Jones that we need to get our act together, speak with a single voice, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps instead of looking for handouts from central government. How does today's report address that criticism? Because it speaks largely to what's needed from central government, right? How does it address that criticism of, well, what do we need to do for ourselves?
Well, I think the opportunity is how do we take the messages in this report as a region and communicate that in an aligned way. So I'm really assured or reassured by the commitment from local government and certainly the iwi organisations that we engage with, that they really support this idea of a more confident te tai tokero in terms of our ambitions for the future and kind of getting out there and working on that together. So, for example, the report launches in Parliament with a significant entourage of local government folks from the north attending that, and we're also co-hosting that event with Tupu Tonu, who are the Ngāpuhi Asset Investment Group. So really, I think it's about sending a strong message that we're aligned. But then I think it's about really going, what are the key enabling things that are within our capability or our mandate within our region? So, for example, clear regional strategies, stable long-term planning frameworks, particularly from local government, more kind of coordination and alignment and focus on the key things that actually make a difference, and making sure that what we can do with all of that is that we build some momentum. So one of our aspirations, I guess, in terms of identifying the $60 billion target for 2050 is in many ways a bit of a corporate trick. You set a big, hairy, audacious goal for yourself, and then you kind of put that out in the horizon, and then you work backwards and go, well, what do we need to do to get there? And I guess I'm really heartened, having had a range of conversations with mayors and CEOs and local government across the north, that everyone's pretty fired up about that goal and really starting to think, how do we come together to talk about it? So just this week, at the end of the week, I've been asked to brief the Joint Regional Economic Development Committee on this exact topic. So I think there's a growing confidence in the region, and there's a growing realization that we need to be aligned and joined up and work together if we want to achieve these big goals.
So, Julian, listen, your previous report, which looked at how the expressway between Warkworth and Whangarei could unlock economic growth in Northland, has recently been panned by critics, some with very clear agendas, it must be said, as lacking academic rigor to some extent. Are you confident that this criticism can't be levelled at this latest piece of work?
I'm very confident, but let's go back to kind of the criticism labelled at the former piece of work, because actually I think that's pretty unfair. And I think it's a little disingenuous. And I think we're seeing a little partisan politics at play here. And you can
what? Really? Never.
You can rest assured that when six corporates spend a very significant amount of money commissioning an independent research from one of the leading economic agencies in the country, and that report gets criticised, then we start to ask questions ourselves of our provider to say, well, are these criticisms valid? And in my view, they're not. And certainly NZIR absolutely maintain the integrity and the independence of the modelling of their report. And I think what that report highlights and has highlighted in its criticism is that there is more than one way to model the benefits of a piece of infrastructure. So if you look at sort of standard transport appraisal methodologies for expressways, the NZIR report and subsequent reports come up with very similar results in terms of the economic benefit. But we know in the north that the real benefit from improved connectivity is not improved health and safety on an expressway and faster travel times on the expressway. It's all of the ecosystem benefits that you get in the business community when connectivity is opened. And so actually what gives us real confidence in that report, but also this kind of current report, is that actually we've got real data and real information from the business community. So when you survey more than 800 businesses and you ask them for specific P&L information about what happens to your business when the Brindewins fails and the road is closed, and what would your cost base be if it was open all the time, and you use and model that data, then you can have a lot of confidence that you've actually got real business information. And I think, if I can be really blunt on that, when politicians criticise an independent report that highlights a range of business cases and they say, we don't believe it, they're basically saying to the business community in Northland, we don't believe you.
Yeah.
Which I think is politically an interesting position to take. But certainly we're really kind of confident in that analysis. And certainly if you look at the other reports that have been commissioned in relation to that expressway, they don't stand up to a lot of public scrutiny. So I think the key for me and the learning here, I think for us, is that we need to do a better job of communicating all of the key findings from those reports across the political spectrum and making sure that everyone has that information. But equally, it's not possible for us to design a full business case on a road that hasn't even been planned or consented yet. So I think we just need to be mindful that partisan politics are playing. And this current report, the one that we're just releasing, it's really a piece of research. So it's got less independent economic modelling, and it's far more about taking a range of existing data sources and aggregating and presenting the information. It's also based on many, many interviews with business leaders, iwi leaders, local government leaders, and small business owners right across Northland, but also going right into Auckland as well. So it's really an amalgamation of research presented as a report.
Excellent. No, good answer. Thank you very much. And look, just finally, Northland Corporate Group is the voice of 6 or 7 larger Northland businesses. This is a question you must get a lot. Is there a risk that those who need to hear Northland's message are hearing from just the big end of town? To what extent are the views and input of the vast majority of smaller Northland businesses covered by your report and its recommendations?
Yeah, it's a good question. Remembering that most of the members of the Northland Group are community-owned businesses and serve
That's a
household
good point. Yep.
small businesses right across North. So I can assure you that the customers of the members of the group, business and residential customers, provide plenty of feedback and input to us. But ultimately, we're kind of corporates that work off data and information. That's kind of the DNA that drives a corporate business. And so we rely really heavily on information from experts, but also from research that we do. So that piece of research that I've mentioned to you a couple of times that NZIR did with 800 Northland businesses covers, the full spectrum of businesses right across the north and has given us really kind of rich information. But what we try and do is host events also across the region. We've done them in Ngawha, Kirikiri and Whangarei, where we kind of invite all members of the business community, big or small, to come along, hear what we're up to, provide us with feedback, and that's been really useful. And I think it's something that we need to continue to do.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you for speaking with me today. All the very, very best for the launch of this report, and I hope it lands on fertile ground. And again, all the very best. Thank you very much, Julian.
My pleasure.
And that's all for today's program. Many thanks to Northland Corporate Group's Julian Smith. True North will return in 2 weeks' time on the 6th of August, when I'll be speaking with Mike Sim, one of Northland's most senior business leaders, about governance best practice and how and why some of Northland's businesses are falling short. I'm Peter Heath. Thank you for joining us. True North is an original podcast by Due North PR. To support our work and to stay on top of Northland business news and analysis, access the pod on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Please do take that small extra step and subscribe, like, follow, comment, and review, as it helps others find the show. Please also share it with those who may not yet be aware that we exist. As the New Zealand media landscape continues to change, we rely on your support to continue doing what we do. Please let us know what you think about the podcast. Ask questions or make suggestions about topics and people we should feature by emailing us at truenorth@duenorthpr.co.nz. We do read every message.